Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. Today, as is almost always the case with the Live Inspired podcast, you are in for an awesome treat. His name is Eric Close. Eric is an actor, he's a director, he's probably most recognized for his roles as FBI agent Martin Fitzgerald in Without a Trace, that ran for a long time, for Teddy Conrad in Nashville. I'm sure many of our listeners and viewers have seen that. And then for Travis Tanner in Suits. That's right. Our guest today has been in Suits. For decades, Eric has built an impressive career in Hollywood while staying true to his core values of faith, of family, and of purpose. Today, Eric joins us to share how his faith has guided him on every step along his journey in his career, the intentional choices he and his wife made to keep their family strong, and how he's learned to embrace challenges as opportunities for growth. He opens up about his struggles with anxiety, about the wisdom he gained from Hollywood icons like Clint Eastwood, and his experience portraying Coach Joe Kennedy in Average Joe. If you haven't seen that show, I watched it recently. It's why we reached out to Eric. It's awesome. It's worth checking out. Average Joe, the coach, was a man whose simple act of prayer after a football game sparked a national controversy. My friends, if you have ever questioned your path, battled self-doubt, or needed reassurance that your struggles indeed have meaning, this conversation today is for you. You're going to leave with a reminder that even in our weakest moments, we are never alone, and that the encouragement to stand firm in your beliefs, no matter what life throws at you, is critically important in all of our lives. So, my friends, we're going to bring him on right now. He is one of my mother's favorite actors and favorite people. And after you hear the conversation today, you're going to understand why not only is he her favorite actor, he's going to be one of yours. Eric Close, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thank you, John. It's good to be here.
Man, it's good to be with a friend right now. You just heard me ramble through your introduction, and it seems like you are on top of the mountain right now. But for the folks who don't know you, and they don't know about your career, and they don't know about your hobbies, if they were to meet you, maybe on a ski lift for the first time, and they say, Eric, tell me what you do. How do you respond to that?
It's funny you bring up skiing because I was skiing earlier today with one of my best friends, and I love being on the chairlift and asking people, hey, where are you from? And inevitably you're going to strike up a conversation, and you get talking with people. And sometimes, if you have enough time on a long lift, you talk about what you do for a living. It's funny. One time, my wife and I were skiing in Utah, and I had my helmet on, my goggles on. I had a baklava, which covers your face, so you couldn't see my face. And this woman fell in front of me on this run called Hidden Treasure at Deer Valley. And I skied down to her because her skis came off and her poles. And I go, hey, I'll help you. So I help this lady up. I get her skis back on and her poles. And I go, are you okay? And she says, yeah. And I go, all right, well, have a good day. And she says, hey, I just want to tell you, I really love your work. And I went, whoa, wait a minute. I said, how do you know who I am? And she goes, I recognized your voice. So that was a great moment when that happened. So sometimes it's just a voice, other times it's a show I've worked on or a movie, and or it just comes up in conversation, and people are pretty cool about it. I love sharing what I do. I'm grateful to be an actor, and I've had a wonderful life. God's blessed me with an incredible life, and I'm so grateful. And the fact that I shouldn't say got to, that I get to act and play different roles, like Joe Kennedy and Average Joe and other projects. It's been a blessed life for sure.
You and I, before I hit record, we're talking about Molotov cocktails and the wildness of being a boy growing up and how grateful we are to have survived that time. You're one of three boys. I think you're the oldest of the lot. What was it like growing up in your family? Just take us back to the glory days.
First of all, I grew up in a very loving home. I'm really grateful for that. My dad's a surgeon. My mom's an artist, and it wasn't without its dysfunction. Every family has that. I want to say that it was like this perfect family, but we grew up. It was a very adventurous family. We did a lot of, camping. My parents were very good about introducing us to lots of things. Sometimes that can be a negative for me because then I get option paralysis when I'm going, what do I want to do? Because there's so many things I'm interested in. But I grew up with two brothers, and sadly, my youngest brother passed away 3 years ago from cancer. And that was hard because we were such a tight unit. The pastor in Nashville, who was good friends with my brother as well, the last time he saw my brother, he came by the house. And as I walked him to the door, he said to me, he goes, Eric, it's not lost on me, your last name, Close. He says, you guys are such a close family. And it's true. We've always been incredibly close. And um, I love my brothers. And I look forward, actually, and I don't say this lightly, I look forward to seeing my brother again someday. And that gives me hope. There's part of his difficult is to lose somebody. Getting a chance to know that I'll see him again will be really cool. And I still have my other brother who I'm really close with too.
Eric, half of adult siblings have no relationship with their siblings.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, for those of us raising kids right now, you're raising yours, I'm raising mine, and a whole bunch of our listeners are raising theirs. What do you think your parents did to instill within you boys not only that fierceness of exploration, just interest in life and camping and nature and who knows what's next, but also that interest and passion for one another?
That's a good question, John. I think it starts with them and how they related to their own family. And my mom and dad were very close with their parents and their siblings. My mom didn't have a sibling, but she was very close with her parents. And her parents, fortunately, were able to escape during the war as well. They kind of followed us around the country. Wherever we moved, my mom's parents came with us. So we were very close with my mom's parents. And my dad was really good about every Sunday getting us to get on the phone and call his mom and dad and talk to grandpa and grandma and talk to his sister. And so family was really important. And we also were really close with my dad's aunts and uncles. They instilled in us this value of family. And so it started there. And then I think my parents were good about kicking us outside. It was like, you're not going to sit around inside. Get your butts outside, go have fun, go be crazy, go get in a little trouble. And so my brothers and I really learned, kind of got street smart. And it was an idyllic time, man, because my parents weren't helicopter parents. They were just like, hey, go be adventurous, get on your bikes, do what you're doing, and be home in time for dinner. And now it's like we kind of micromanage, and we're always keeping track on these apps of like, where's my kid? What are they doing? And so we bonded and we played sports together and we fought. And then the cool thing is that my parents, when we did fight, it was like, okay, now you need to make up, learn how to say sorry, learn how to deal with the consequences when you get in trouble and you're grounded. And they just instilled a real deep sense of family. And we did a lot of things together. My parents were good about doing things together as a couple. And then we would stay with my grandparents and they would go if my dad needed to go on a medical trip or something. But they had a nice balance. My mom and dad were always at our sporting events. And I give my dad a lot of credit as a doctor who's building his practice. He's a busy surgeon. He was really intentional, along with my mom, to be at our sporting events, support us with our school projects, all that kind of stuff. So I'm very fortunate that way. And we've tried to do the same thing with our two girls.
You went ultimately on to USC, joined a fraternity called Sigma Chi. They were our bitter rivals where I went to college, but we won't talk about that right now. When you were in college, what was your vision for your career, man? What were you thinking you would do later on?
It's interesting, John. I don't want to say I was a wayward kid, and I don't like labels, but I guess you would say I was like an ADHD kid, attention deficit, hyperactive. My mind's very creative. And I got in a lot of trouble in school because I just was daydreaming all the time. And so college, I got in by the skin of my teeth to college. I'm so grateful to some people who helped me, who wrote letters on my behalf to get me into USC. Because I know today I never would have gotten into USC with the grade point average I had back then. And, college has changed a lot.
Yeah.
But it was a blessing that I got into USC because not only getting to USC was a confidence booster, but also I joined this fraternity and made these lifelong friendships with my fraternity brothers. And all of us came from pretty good families and we all wanted to be successful at something. And We didn't know what that was. Some guys did. Some guys knew they were going to go to work for their dads or whatever. And I had figured out pretty early on in college that I wasn't going to be able to be a doctor like my dad. He's just a brilliant guy and was an incredible student, super disciplined. He's an Eagle Scout. And I just was kind of the opposite of that. And I wanted to practice medicine with him, but I just couldn't, I wasn't doing well in school. And so I was really kind of into my junior year. And I took a semester and went to Spain and studied in Spain. And I was very fortunate to be able to do that. And while I was there, one of my friends who was also a USC student, she told me she was going to go into the film industry because I was kind of like, what are you going to do when you graduate? And she said, I want to become a filmmaker. And I'm like, well, tell me more about that. And so we got talking and I thought, man, I love telling stories. Maybe that's what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to get in the entertainment business and see if I can make a go of it. Because I had done some plays and in school and I enjoyed being on stage and telling stories. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll do that route. So when I went back, I declared a major in communications, and then I had some extra time. So I picked up classes in the film school there at USC, which is a tremendous film school, one of the best in the world. And I started taking classes and I thought, oh, I want to be a director. I really like this. This is really fun. I loved all the different aspects of the set in a dolly grip, holding, a microphone and just loading film and all that. And I got really excited about that. So I started working on student films and while I was getting my major. And during that process, some people had asked me, hey, would you mind acting in my student film? And I go, yeah, sure, I'll do that too. So I started doing that. And one thing led to another, and things just started shifting and pointing me more towards acting. There came a certain point where I just went, I got to go for it. And I remember calling my mom in tears, actually. And I said, she's always been such an advocate for me. And I just said, Mom, I'm afraid to tell Dad, but I think I want to be an actor, and he spent all this money on me to go to USC. And now I'm telling him I'm going to be an actor. And she just said to me, your dad and I will support you, whatever you want to do. And my dad was cool. He said, hey, if that's what you want to do, work hard at it and go for it. And hopefully it works out for you. And so it was at that point I just said, all right, I'm going to go for it. And, God really had a big impact on me that because I really surrendered it and just said, okay, God, this is what you want me to do to enter into a field that I don't know a soul in. I need your help because I don't think I can do this on my own. And God opened all kinds of doors and it was just really, and it didn't mean I hustled. I mean, I didn't sit on my couch. I was out there and I really worked hard to at least be ready for opportunities that came my way.
You're going to credit this a little bit to the hustle and a little bit to faith, probably a lot to faith, but you've had such a sustained and successful run in an industry that is brutal, one that is extraordinarily difficult to break into, and one that's extremely difficult to remain relevant in. And
Mm-hmm.
year after year, decade now upon decade, you just keep moving forward. And so going back to the early days, like what were you doing as a novice, man, as a key grip, as a best boy, and all the roles that you were doing before you really made it in front of the camera, and then as you started working behind the camera, that you found ultimately drove you forward as a successful actor and now director?
As I mentioned, these different skill sets that you have on, because what I love about a film or television set, even theater, is you have all these people who work in different aspects and they all come together and it's this collaboration for one goal, and that's to make this final product. A director can't make a movie by himself. A writer can't make a movie by himself. An actor, you can get an incredible actor in a movie, but if no one else shows up, that movie's not getting made. And so I just really loved the whole aspect of all the elements that go into making a story come to life on screen. There is this feeling when you're on set, and especially when it's something you want to do, and you're on set and everything's happening, you just feel like you're supposed to be there. And there's just such an energy and a newness about it. And I loved every aspect of it. The one part that really stressed me out, John, was loading film. I was always so stressed out that I was going to let light into the loading bag and ruin a set of dailies, or so that was a
The
super
newer
tough.
listeners
I know
have
I
no
don't.
clue what you're talking about, man. They're like, what is film? What is this man talking
Yeah, I
about?
know. Film was this stuff that we used to shoot on, and now everything's digital. But I got to tell you, when you're loading film, especially film that's been exposed and already shot, Oh, it's so stressful because you're thinking, if I let any light in this, I've ruined all the film for the day and you got to reshoot. And so that was stressful. So I'm like, I don't want to be a camera operator guy because those guys are really good. But the coolest thing was I never gave up on my dream to direct. And so then eventually I got my shot and I started directing, and I love that just as much. What I like about that is because I'm collaborating with all of the crew and all the department heads and the people that work under those, the department heads. Acting, you're really kind of interacting with your cast, the director,
Right.
and the prop guy, the hair and makeup people, but you're not really interacting with everybody else a lot because you're focused on that job. And so as a director, you're wearing a lot more hats.
Do you have to fall in love with the person you're portraying and the project you're part of to not only say yes to it that first time for like maybe a television show or a movie, but for you, like Without a Trace, to do it episode after episode, year after year for almost a decade? Like, do you have to believe in that character and in that series to keep showing up and delivering on it with everything you got?
Yeah. First of all, I'll tell you, and I'm pretty sure I'm 100% on this. Every single role I've taken, I started with the story. There have been roles that I've seen where I thought, oh, this is a pretty cool role. I could sink my teeth into this one, but I don't like the story. I don't like the script. And at the end of the day, the job of the actor is to do the best job they can with that role because that role is a piece of the puzzle.
Right.
And I felt that, yeah, I can do a good job with this role, but I want to sit down when this is all done, and I want to be able to say, wow, I really dig this story. And I think that's why I've been able to even kind of lose myself in projects that I'm in when I'm acting and then I end up watching. I really can watch as a viewer and I'm not sitting there critiquing my performance, which is pretty cool because I can sit as an audience member and kind of set myself aside and just enjoy the story. It's fun to play these different characters. And as far as like you brought up Martin Fitzgerald on Without a Trace, I really loved Martin. He had a great journey. He was the green guy who came on. He was wet behind the ears, didn't know much, and the journey that he went on, I think, had that series continued on like NCIS has, or some of these shows that have run for 20 years plus, I could have seen Martin becoming like a higher up in the FBI, almost like kind of filling into Jack's shoes at some point, where Jack would have got promoted to even a more senior role as opposed to just a head of a team. I could see Martin at some point maybe running a team. He'd been through a lot. There was a storyline we did where Martin was injured in the line of duty and got addicted to opiates, because of the painkillers. And that's a real story. And it impacted a lot of people. So I was grateful for that role because it told people, hey, you can beat this, you can get over, you can get through this. So that was pretty cool.
So we had the joy recently of working with William H. Macy for a film project called On Fire, and the the piece he was coming out of is called Shameless, and I think they did like 13 years of Shameless where he plays
Yes.
Frank Gallagher, and so everywhere we would go, people didn't call him Bill or William, it was
Oh,
Frank.
Frank.
Hey
Yeah.
Frank, and he would turn and look. Are you identified by the roles you play? Do they think you're Travis Tanner, Teddy Conrad, and do they view you as these guys from Suits in Nashville?
You took the words out of my mouth. Not this past July, but the July before was when Suits got re-released on Netflix. And it blew up all over the world. So my mom and dad and my wife and I flew to Florence to go to Italy. And upon arrival, I start getting accosted by people there going, and they say, instead of saying suits, they say sweets, sweets, sweets. And they're like, Tanner, Tanner. And it was crazy. We went everywhere we went in Italy that July. People were going nuts. I mean, people from Australia were coming up to me on the train platform, getting ready, and in Cinque Terre. And I'm just going, what is going on here? But it just shows you the impact that television has, or the media, just film and television, the impact it has globally. And because the character of Travis Tanner that I played on Suits, I was only in 8 episodes out of that entire series, maybe seven or 8 episodes. But one, the role was so recognizable and unique that people remembered that character because, he was butting heads with the lead guy, Harvey. So they had these great battles, which was really cool. The writing was amazing. Aaron Korsh did just a fantastic job on that show. And the character development was amazing. Yeah, people do that sometimes. They'll say things like, sometimes people who, when I was on Nashville, people would say, "Hey, Mayor," they call out, "Hey, Mayor," or yeah, it's fun. And I'm sure Bill Macy enjoys it too, getting called Frank, because look, he did a great job on that show. I haven't seen the show. My wife watched it, but when you're in people's living rooms for 13 years, it's like when I was a kid, Tom Selleck was the man. He was on Magnum PI. And my mom and all their friends, oh, they would just love Tom Selleck. Oh, it's Tom Selleck. They'd have posters of him on their refrigerators. And
So as you're in front of a camera and then behind the camera, which I had no idea how difficult directing was, I assumed they're the guys up on the chair that ultimately are in charge of just the filming process, but it's everything. It's 24 hours a day and it's way pre-development during the filming and then for a year or more afterwards. It's a ton of work. How do you balance driving forward to successfully accomplish the project at hand, whatever that might be, while at the same time striving to be a good husband, a good son, a good son-in-law? I know you're wild about your in-laws, a good dad, a good friend. You've shared on other stories about your friend Dave, your former roommate in college. How do you balance these two things where you're driving for success and you're extraordinarily busy and in demand, but there's this pull toward wanting to just let all that go and be at home?
yeah, you have to find a balance for sure. I think one thing that, and everybody's experience is different. So I don't want to say mine is that I have the answer, but from my experience, it had a lot to do with how my dad was. Okay. Because I have lots of friends who their dads were workaholics, and either they ended up kind of being the same way or they kind of went the other way and they're like, I'm not going to do that. And I think we all want to kind of take the good, positive things that we learned and kind of not repeat things that weren't so great. I just knew from the beginning of my career that there was, first of all, from day one, before I had any kind of work in my career, God was going to be first in my life. That was my story. That was my journey. But everything started with my relationship with God in Christ. And secondly, my family, and then my friends, and then my work. I've always felt like if I do my best to put God first in my life, everything else is going to get a lot better attention from me than if I put something else first. So everything else will suffer if I put my family first before God, or my friendships before, or my work before, or my fitness before, any of that kind of stuff. But I think if you get it balanced right, and it's like, okay, God, I need you to help me get through this life and navigate and give me wisdom and knowledge. I think everything else, and you don't always get it right. So, for example, my wife and I established a rule that not a rule, an intention that we would try not to go more than 2 weeks apart on any project. Because, you have to travel a lot. So if I had to go do a movie, I'd be gone. Well, okay, I'm going to find a way to be home and see you, or you're going to come see me, but we're not going longer than 2 weeks. And so for the last 30 years, we've been really good about that and very intentional about that. There's been a handful of times where it didn't work. We had family members who were ill and we just needed to take care of. Or I was so far away and my wife's got the little kids and she's dealing with that. It would have been hard for her to get all the way to Portland, Maine when we're living in Los Angeles. And so maybe we didn't see each other for 4 weeks. That's always a little tough. But for the most part, we really tried to find that balance. And another thing, John, that I've always been, since I was a young kid, I've always been a huge Clint Eastwood fan. And as I got older and I got into the industry, I wanted to study these heroes of mine that, I wanted to understand, what made them tick and how they worked. And I was very fortunate in my career around the time of Without a Trace. And I give a lot of credit to the CBS network for opening these doors for me. I ended up getting to meet Clint and spend time with him and go on set and watch him direct and ask him a lot of questions. over about a 12-year period before I even ever ended up working with him. But one of the things I really admired about him is he's a guy who exudes a lot of confidence, and it's not false confidence. He really is just like, he believes in what he's doing. He's super well prepared, and he doesn't overthink things. And I've struggled with that earlier in my life where I way overthink things. And he's the
Right.
kind of guy who would just be like, okay, I got what I need. I'm moving on. And so, you hear the famous stories where he sometimes will only shoot the rehearsal and then he'll move on. And, and
Right.
there's other directors who will shoot one take 60 times.
Yeah.
So everybody's different. And that's what's great about art. It's different. It's subjective, right? And for me, what I decided early on in my career is that I was not going to let my family take a backseat to my work.
Hmm.
And so, maybe to the detriment of my career a little bit, there were times where I took time off intentionally and just said, I'm not available for the next 2 months because I'm going to be with my family because I've been busy working for 9.5 months on this series. I want to have some good quality time with them while they're out of school for the summer. My wife and I, we found a way to make that work. As my kids, even when they were little, I think Ella, when she was born, I was just starting Without a Trace, and Katie was just a couple of years old, maybe 3. And so they've always been with me. So they would come to set and they would sit in the director's chair while I was working. And I made sure that they actually got to see my work and know what daddy did, and what I was doing. And as they got older, they got excited to come. Like some of these Hallmark movies I've directed, they'd come and hang out for a while and just loved it. And I love it when I'm on a set and other people bring their families. It's really fun to, someone brings their little kid and I go, hey, hop up in the director's chair. You can sit and give them the little headphones so they can, you've been on set probably when you're there and they give you the headset and you're sitting there at Video Village and you're watching the director's work and everything go on. It's really fun to be there.
It is the most boring thing I've ever seen for the first half an hour. And then you fall in love with this pace of wash and repeat and flip the set over and come at it from the other side. And
Mm-hmm.
man, I don't know if I'll do it again, but it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I think it's beautiful you brought your kids and family on board. You also mentioned Clint Eastwood. One of my favorite singers is Toby Keith. And one of my favorite songs from Toby Keith is Don't Let the Old Man In.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that whole song is because he got to party with Clint and he said, man, how do you keep doing this work? And Clint's simple response was, I don't let the old man in.
Yeah.
And the final bow on this before I shift it back to you is I was with my mom and dad just 3 nights ago, and my mom had heard about a new film out called, I think, Juror Number Two. So I got it loaded up for her, and then I see that it's produced by a guy named Clint Eastwood. Here he is in his early 90s, mid
92.
90s.
Yeah.
And dude, he's still cranking out beautiful work. He refuses to let the old man in.
Mm-hmm. I asked him about that. We were in the green room at Pebble Beach. I asked him I think at the time he was probably about 82. I hadn't worked with him yet because when I worked with him on American Sniper, he turned 85. And at 82, I asked him, are you think there's kind of an end in sight? You might retire. And he told me, he goes, why? No, I love what I do. And I'm paraphrasing, but he just said, I love what I do. And as long as I can do it, I'm going to keep doing it.
Mm.
So that to me is really cool. And I kind of have the same attitude. I don't know you got to hold on to these things loosely. And it's sometimes you think, well, this is what I'm going to do next. And I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do that. Maybe a handful of people can do that. That's rare. That's Steven Spielberg, Clint Eastwood, Tom Cruise air, where they kind of know exactly what they're doing next and what I'm kind of, every day I don't know what's next. And
Right.
there's an excitement about that. I hope I can continue to keep doing what I'm doing and acting and directing. And, if that's God's will, I'll keep doing it. But I'm grateful.
Well, let's talk about what's right in front of us. You have a new film, Average Joe. And from the limited amount I know about this film and the guy you're portraying, there's nothing average about this guy. So tell us about this project.
Yeah, it's an interesting title for it because, yeah, Joe Kennedy's, like you said, he's far from average. But I think that's what's sort of endearing about Joe. He doesn't see himself as some big deal. He just goes, hey, I'm just a regular Joe. I'm just a guy who's trying to take care of my family and put some food on the table. But he is a man of character and integrity and pride in the good sense. He's proud to be an American. He's proud to have served our country for such a time as this. When this calling came into his life, he held his ground. It almost cost him his marriage because it was really stressful. Denise is incredible. I mean, she stood by him through some really tough times, and they together overcame adversity for a really worthy cause and something that Joe and Denise believed in 100%. And he was willing to go the distance and lose it all in a sense. And in a way, he did. He lost his job. He lost his reputation for a while. A lot of people turned their backs on him. But he's one of the nicest guys you've ever met. He's the real deal.
Right.
And I was honored to play him in this movie. And there's pressure when you're playing. So whoever's portraying you in your film, it's the same thing. There's pressure to do it right, do it justice, and honor your story. And I wanted to honor Joe and Denise's story when I took this role on. And Harold Kronk did an incredible job with this movie. He was so creative. He took some risks with the way he told the story, and I love that he wanted to go back to the beginning and tell Joe's story because Joe's early life is so integral to the overall journey he went on
Right.
that you had to know Joe's early life to understand this man and why he was willing to go the distance.
So with the way you shared what Joe's been through sounds that people are just listening if they don't know who he really is, that he served our nation in some capacity. And that was the inflection point. And although that's certainly part of the story, what they will remember from CNN and Fox and MSNBC and the Wall Street Journal and every other paper they tuned into and blog they read was not about his service to the nation, but what seemingly was just a whispered proclamation of his faith that incited people to move against him. So what is the inflection point? What is the story ultimately hinging on?
For me, it started with his faith. He wouldn't have taken on this battle if he didn't have his faith, but it also had to do with his love of country, a love of the United States and the freedoms that we have in this country. You listen, no one should ever take lightly the freedoms we have in the country. It bothers me when I see people talk negatively about our country because my family found freedom here. And I know lots of people have found freedom here from oppression and tyranny. And I mean, the stories go on and on, they're endless. I really admired that this guy was willing to, like I said, put it all on the line, but he promised God. He said, God, if you heal my wife from this stroke that she had and you heal our marriage because they were struggling in their marriage, he says, I'm going to commit to you to kneel on the 50-yard line after every game, whether we win or lose, and just give you thanks. And he did it because it really started with his faith in God before it was about the Supreme Court battle. It was principle to him. He felt that he was honoring God by doing this. And I admire that. I mean, it's very respectable that he did that in the face of a lot, like I said, a lot of adversity and criticism.
Loss of income and almost a loss of family and friendships and health. Like he's an amazing man, and I'm excited to view it.
It's on a lot of different streaming avenues. It was in theaters and it had a good turn in the theaters. And then now Great American Family is behind it. So people will be able to find it there. There's lots of ways to see it, and people have been responding really positively to the movie. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback, and it's the other thing I love about it. It's a movie that you can watch with your family, but it's still got some pretty intense themes in it. They don't, like I said, that Harold didn't sugarcoat it in the story. You needed to know the traumatic things that Joe went through as a kid and through his early life and what he endured during the war in his military service. But I think there's good lessons in it that a father or parents can teach their kids from this film. One of the things I think is just doing the right thing. And a lot of people, it's difficult to do the right thing, especially when your livelihood's being threatened. You have to admire people who take a stand and just say, this, for me, this is the right thing, and I'm going to take a stand, and I'm not going to waver in even in the face of adversity.
You have several more than several. I wrote down six. I'm only going to ask you about two that I've
Okay.
heard you say in the
Okay.
past that just I think are so relevant, in particular on the heels of what you shared regarding Joe. So the first is this: I am grateful for my life's journey, and then you said even the struggle. And then I've heard you say that you're even taking note of being extraordinarily grateful lately for the struggles, which sounds at first glance so counterintuitive. So tell me about that. You're grateful for your life story, even the struggle.
I always say no one gets out of this life unscathed. And there's a million different stories. You have your story. I have my story. But my wife is a silver. She makes silver jewelry. So like you can see this ring I'm wearing.
Wow.
And the process is this silver has to be refined in the fire at high temperatures. And after it comes out, she polishes it. It's not doesn't come out perfect. It comes a lot better than you have a silver ring, but there's all kinds of stuff on it, and it gets polished and it gets worked on, and then it starts to shine. And we grow in our adversity. You and I promised I wouldn't do this, but you are where you are today, and you're in 130 countries, and you're making an impact in not only your family's life and your four kids, but people all over the world because of your story and the adversity you went through. We grow when things are difficult.
Mm.
And it's hard because we want comfortable lives. We don't want things to be difficult. I mean, just open your medicine cabinet and you look, well, that's why there's aspirin and Tylenol because you don't like to have a headache. You don't like there's Pepto-Bismol because you don't like feeling nauseous. We always are trying to find ways to make our life more comfortable, but that always doesn't make us stronger or better. It's hard. I mean, I don't want to get too into this, but I for the longest time never openly talked about struggling with anxiety. I've had that my whole life, but didn't really realize it as a kid because I was just hyperactive. I got a lot of my energy out and stuff. But as you grow older and you get more responsible and you have a family and a career, and it's easy to feel that pressure and
Right.
get anxious about things. And so I've had to deal with that. But because of it, I will tell you, the number one thing is it's reminded me where my hope comes from and where my reliance should be. And it's not on like, oh, well, if I get a next job, that's going to make my life perfect, or, whatever. I could name a ton of things, but what's that saying? When I'm weak, God is strong. In the times of my life where I am vulnerable, that's where do I look? I look to God and say, hey, I need you. I need your help. I need you to kind of guide me, give me some wisdom here, how to deal with what I'm dealing with. And I will tell you, when I directed for my first time on Without a Trace, I freaked out. If I'm being straight up honest. And some people don't struggle with this kind of stuff. Some people they just have a different makeup and they just are like, right on. I love it. I love the pressure, like look at a guy like Tom Brady. I'm sure he feels pressure, but just some people handle it different. Tiger Woods handles the pressure different. But I was really, really nervous because I had pushed so hard and so long to want to get a shot to direct. And then it happened. And all of a sudden I'm like, I don't know anything about directing. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna mess this up. It's gonna be terrible, and they'll never hire me again. And I got really stressed out. But then I just started preparing. I started preparing because I remember, like I told you, Clint Eastwood, he's a preparer, and I'm like, okay, what would Clint do? He'd prepare. He'd be ready. So I prepared, and I got really focused. And first day on set started, and it went fantastic. And the coolest thing was after I directed, Jerry Bruckheimer called me. I was at the Getty Museum with my family, and I get a phone call from Jerry Bruckheimer, who, his company did Without a Trace and produced it. And he just said, hey, man, you did a really great job. I hope you direct more episodes for us. And looking back on that, boy, I was scared to death, but it gave me a confidence that I could do it and that the next time it wasn't as stressful. And so I gained some confidence through that adversity. And I think a lot of times we shy away from adversity. And I think just go for it. Take the chance. I always tell when I speak to groups of young kids, I always say, you got to go for it. The most successful people have had a lot of failures. Look at Thomas Edison. I think he's got like 1,000 failures and then he created the light bulb, So I think it's great to just to go for it and face your fears, because also people want to help you. I realized that too. I had a whole team of people who were like, we don't want you to fail and we're going to be here to help you. And it was an awesome team experience. And I got through it. So yeah, I am grateful for the adversity, 100%.
So the beautiful thing is in your answer to one quote, you spoke to all six that I wrote down, whether it's about fear or faith or the incredible journey, or for those who choose to see it as such. So right on. We're going to shift now into what we call the Live Inspired 7. Right before I do that, though, I have one final question for you. For those right now who are struggling, you mentioned anxiety. You mentioned the loss of your brother due to cancer. You've lost other friends and family members along the way. Uh, you've had many failures in your professional career, and those are the ones we're aware of. I'm sure you've quietly dealt with your own stuff. For those who are dealing with their own stuff right now, listening to our conversation, and they're hearing these two guys talking about their family and their kids and films coming out, and they don't have that stuff. They don't have the relationship. They may not have the health. They may not have the finances. They may not have the agency to move forward in their own mind. What's your encouragement to them right now?
That's a big question. The thing I've discovered in my life is that there are endless stories. Everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different journey. But what I try to encourage people is to say that don't give up. Don't give up hope. There is someone out there that cares. And sometimes it's a phone call, sometimes it's a letter, sometimes it's just a knock on a door. Ultimately, it's surrendering and saying, God, I need your help. I and someone might not even believe. And I've heard these amazing stories where people go, I don't even know if I believe in you. And then they say, prove me wrong. Just show me that you're real and that you're there. And it's amazing how God just shows up and says, I'm here and I love you. God does love us and wants to be in our life. And I think a lot of times it's hard for people to understand, well, how does God love us and all these bad things happen? These fires rip through the Pacific Palisades and, we have earthquakes and people die of cancer. And I don't have the answers to all that. Why? I don't. But I know that we live in a world that has natural disasters. And for whatever reason, we have diseases and accidents happen. But I also believe at the same time that God really does care and is with us in it.
Mm.
And it's hard. I mean, like you brought up my brother, losing my brother. I mean, that was really tough because we were incredibly close. We talked 3 or 4 times a day. We shared a lot in common. We did a lot together and I miss him. But like I said, there's this hope that I have. I can hang on the memories, the great memories, but also I know that I'm going to see him again. We'll be reunited one day. This isn't the end. But for those people out there that are struggling, know that you are loved and that don't give up, don't give up. It's hard to tell someone who's really in the depths of it. And I know people can look at my life and go, but you don't get my story. And I can say, yeah, I don't. I may not know what it's like to be in such deep depression that you don't want to live, but I believe that there is help out there and just not to give up.
Eric Close, we wrap every single Live Inspired podcast with 7 questions. We call them the Live Inspired 7.
Oh
So
boy.
get your snow pants on for one more ride down the mountain. Let's go, baby. You and me at the top. One final run.
All right. All right. Let
It's
me
a blue. I don't feel like doing blacks right now, so we're gonna do a blue
let me
together.
let me get my suspenders up here.
All right, man. So number 1, what's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
The Bible.
It's a big book.
66 books. 66 books.
If you had to pick one from within the 66, which one would you direct people toward?
Wow, that's a good one. The one that most people always say to go to is John. Started John. It is a wonderful book because it really introduces you to Christ and you get to know him intimately and what he's about and how much he cares about each and every person. So I'd say John's a great book. And as far as any book outside of the Bible, I've read so many books. I just don't think it would be fair because there's so many wonderful books that I've read that I wouldn't want to say one's better than the other. I can say what I'm reading right now. I'm reading The Caine Mutiny, which was written by Herman Wouk in 1954. So that's the book I'm reading right now.
Both of those books, both John and the most recent one, ought to go on our reading shelf, I think.
I was also going to say I really like the book of James too.
Man, so obviously in this podcast, we have folks from all faith walk And
Yeah.
and then people who are Christian who don't say the Bible first. They say a million other books, and that's fine. It's their prerogative. But when they do say the Bible, if I ask them to say, and which book? Almost always they say either John or James. And
Really? That's
oh
cool.
man, I mean, and for those who don't know much about the scripture, like you really should just, even if it's only to learn a little bit about scripture, either one of those books is awesome. They'll light you up. And
Listen, without getting too much into it, I also love Proverbs. I think the Proverbs are an
right.
incredible guide to wisdom and just living life.
Well, and like people who live in my space, the inspirational, motivational space, pretend like they're coming up with these new ideas of how to live. And yet, what we heard 2,700 years ago is there's nothing new under the sun. And so those
Yeah,
proverbs that were taken from ancient wisdom were applicable then and are absolutely applicable right now in your life. And so right on.
totally. If you go to the bookstore and there's that section, the self-help section, and there's hundreds, if not thousands of books, all of those are based on the wisdom from
Right.
thousands of years ago. All of them.
What is one positive characteristic or one trait that you possessed as a little boy growing up, whether it was in Indiana, Michigan, I think you were born in New York, or ultimately California, that you wish you exhibited more today? So, more succinctly, what's one positive characteristic you had as a little boy that you wish you exhibited a little
Oh,
bit
that
more
I
of?
don't maybe exhibit as much today. That's tricky because when you started to ask me the question, I was going to say curiosity because I'm very curious. That hasn't gone away. I would say as a kid, and you know what? Jesus said this. Remember, he said, you got to become like a child. Until you become like a child, you can't inherit the kingdom of God. I think what he was talking about is just this kind of blind faith, this just abandon to just trusting that everything's going to be okay. And I think if I would say this probably to everybody is I think we all longed. You ever heard that saying that someone says there was a day when you went outside to play with your friends and it was the last time you ever did that and you didn't know it? You ever heard that? It's kind of like it's sort of one of those things where I think we all look back at our childhood. If it were like I said, mine was idyllic. I just loved that kind of freedom and you weren't worried about the future. So I guess that would be a characteristic that I would tell myself today is, and I try to work at this is just say, hey, don't worry so much about the future. Just be present today, like you were as a kid. Just go out and enjoy your life and just take the punches as they come, the adversity as they come, and don't get too far ahead of yourself. So I think that's maybe something that I wish I had as strong as I did as a kid. Yeah.
Earlier in our conversation, you mentioned the fires raging in Los Angeles. And what I know about your life is that you were almost affected by fires. Your fraternity house burned down. And although
Mhm.
everyone escaped,
Yep.
barely, barely. So question number three is going to hit home for you, I think. What's if your home caught fire and all living things were out and you had an opportunity of quickly running in and grabbing one item, what's that one physical thing you'd come racing back outside with?
I was talking to my friend today when we were skiing because he used to live in the Palisades. I lived in Los Angeles forever. And we were talking about that. And there was nothing that there's nothing there. I can't think. I have things in this house that are very sentimental to me. That, like, for example, this Indian head right here. See this?
Yeah.
What do you call it? Yeah, it's a spearhead. This was from, when I was 5 years old, we went to visit the Mohican tribe in Michigan. And we were walking along the river, and the guide who was walking us reached down and found this and gave this to me. I still have it. I was 5 years old. That was 52 years ago. And even that, I thought about it today when my friend and I were talking about it. I even thought, oh, the arrowhead, that would burn up. And I really can't think of anything in here. I just would want to make sure that my family and was safe. And I have several friends who lost their homes this week in the last couple of days in the Palisades, and every one of them said everything's gone, but we're safe and we'll be okay. We'll find a way to rebuild. God provided that house, and if He wants to provide again, He will. Sorry, I wish I could give you a specific thing.
No, man, you
Um,
you just did.
I
and you
might,
not only gave it to
I
me.
might grab a little jar of Nutella because I love Nutella so much.
Well, one of my guests said I would grab a bag of marshmallows and
Yeah.
I'd grab a stick once I got outside and I'd watch the thing burn. And so I think you're basically
That's a
saying the
good
same thing,
answer.
man. Like what I have with me, if my family's there and my faith is below me, I'm okay.
Yeah.
If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous day and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you like to be next to?
There's this great song by Luke Bryan called Drink a Beer, and it's about him losing somebody important to him. And he goes, I'm just going to sit right here at the edge of this pier and watch the sunset slip away and drink a beer. Basically, you
Yeah.
know, if I could, like this minute, John, right now, if I could be somewhere, I'd be with my brother. I'd be, I just, this will sound, maybe people will get this. There's two things I really miss about him. His laughter, the laughter we laughed because we laughed a lot together. And he also had these, he was a construction guy. So he had these big, strong hands. And whenever you shook hands with him, you just felt safe, like everything was going to be okay. And so I miss that. I would love just to, shake his hand and kick back with him on a bench, looking out over the mountains or a river, or watching birds. We love talking about birds and different things. So yeah, probably be
Thank
my
you.
brother. Yeah.
A beautiful answer.
Yeah.
What's the best advice your brother or the other brother or your mother or dad or anyone else ever gave you? So the best advice you've ever received is,
It's so funny you bring that up. I spoke at a men's group a few weeks ago and I got asked that question and my dad was there. And I looked at my dad and I said, the best advice my dad ever gave me was he always used to say, a place for everything and everything in its place, because we would always misplace his stuff. So he was always like, where's my hammer? Where's my screwdriver? And he goes, guys, a place for everything and everything in its place. So that was some pretty good advice. I mean, there's so many great pieces of advice I've gotten over my life, but I think it's important just to do our best to try and to love other people and try to understand. It's hard, it's hard, but to try to understand other people. We don't know people's journey, and so a lot of times the way a person behaves, you don't know what's behind that and where they're coming from.
what advice would you give yourself at age 20?
That's a great question. The advice I would give myself at age 20 would have been, don't second guess so much. Just make a decision and go for it and deal with it, deal with the outcome, because there's always tomorrow. That would have been at 20 something I would say, knowing where I am now, is just don't sweat the small stuff so much.
Eric Close, you run the gauntlet almost. Final question is, it has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
Oh, that's easy. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I say it all the time. I'm very grateful. And when I say hallelujah, it's because I'm thankful to God for life and just for the friendships, my family, and just the extraordinary journey that I'm on. Not that I've had, because it's still going. But yeah, just I told someone, if I do end up having a tombstone someday, put that on there. Just hallelujah with a couple exclamation marks.
Well, Eric Close, hallelujah. We are grateful that you are in the game, that you are part of our lives, that you're doing the work that you're doing, not only with Average Joe, but the work you've done leading up to it and the work you're going to do going forward. I look forward to you one day on that ski lift with your brother, and I hope it's no time soon, but I'm looking forward to you having that conversation with him.
Thank you.
My friends, that is Eric Close. My name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift. Live inspired. Hallelujah.
Well, my friends, I told you on the front of the conversation, you would love our conversation with Eric Close, not just because he's one of my mother's favorite actors, not just because he's had his beautiful face plastered over all types of movies and films and television shows, but because of the humble heart that guides him forward. If you enjoyed today's episode with Eric about faith and football and about being part of something larger than yourself, you will love my conversation with a football coach named Bill Courtney. Bill is a business owner. He's a husband. He's a father who believes that giving back isn't something nice to do. It's a responsibility. You can hear how Bill chose to coach football in an impoverished North Memphis high school and how through the tenets of love, consistency, self-assurance, he turned the team and also, more importantly, many lives around for good. You can listen to the Bill Courtney conversation way back on the dial at episode 28, or by just joining me online right now at johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. We'll have a link in the show notes. Well, friends, leaders, family, if you haven't tuned in lately to the episodes of the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary, that probably means also you don't subscribe. So do me a big favor, wherever you listen to your podcast, subscribe right now. Tell your friends that you work with, worship with, work out with, that you listen to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary, and so should they. I want to thank you for being part of that family, and I want to remind you that in spite of the struggles that we face today, the foundation is firm, the God is still God, and that the best is yet to come. So for this time, and until next time, my name is John O'Leary. Today is your day. What a gift. Live inspired.